listening to Reality Wrap. I'm your host, Melanie. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into Reality Wrap. Today I'm going to be recapping last night's episode of The Real Housewives of New York, Season 15, Episode 4. You guys... What are we doing here? So I really was hoping this episode was going to be better than last week's episode. And honestly, it was worse than last week's episode. I'm going to give this week's episode a D. Because where are these women? Other than Ubah coming after Brynn, we have nothing. Nothing from Sai, nothing from Erin, nothing from Jenna. We are getting stuff from Raquel. I do like her background story that she's sharing with us. I don't even know why Rebecca Minkoff is on this show. I don't think she really did anything in this episode that I can remember. Why these women are not asking her about her Scientology. We have such an opportunity here to really kind of make it interesting, but they really are taking on such a hands-off approach when it comes to her being a Scientologist, which is super fascinating, honestly. But for whatever reason, we do get Erin, I think, in this episode. She does make a comment about how it's weird that Rebecca is Jewish and also a Scientologist because they have opposing views, and somehow she's able to belong to both religions. But other than that, they really are tiptoeing around this Scientology thing for whatever reason. And maybe it's going to come out later on in this season, but they are really missing an opportunity to make this season interesting. Brynn playing the perpetual victim is really getting old. She literally talks about how she's like this boss bitch and how she's like carbon monoxide and she'll get you silently. But then as soon as you hold her feet to the fire, she starts to cry. She's constantly going to the other castmates telling them what somebody else has said about them. So she's stirring the pot. She's making fun of Ubah's accent when she's like, no, 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 no. And it looks like she does it again coming up in, is it next week's episode? We also have this episode where she tells Ubah to stop playing the angry Black woman. Ubah is coming hard for her, but at this point, I don't really blame her. Brynn is a snake. Ubah is right. I'm really hoping this season gets better because at this point, I literally feel like last season was 10 times better than the current season, which usually a new cast starts out slow and gets better. Last season was okay. I mean, it wasn't great by any means. It was okay. We were getting to know them. But this season has just progressively gotten worse. I don't understand. There is no chemistry between these women. They're clearly not friends outside of this show. They're co-workers at this point, and it shows. All right, enough of the bashing. What a way for me to start my podcast. This episode starts with the ladies on a Sprinter van going to tennis lessons. They're talking about breastfeeding, and Rebecca tells a story about how her and her husband were out at a club in Paris and her milk came in, which for those of you who have never breastfed, when your milk comes in, when it's time for the baby to eat, your boobs get really heavy and full feeling and they get tingly and it starts to hurt if you don't release the milk. So she tells us that she asked her husband to take one for the team and they went into the bathroom and he essentially drained her because there was no baby to do it for her. And I'm assuming she didn't have a breast pump with her. And he spit it out in the sink and Sai's like, yeah, I don't think David would ever do that. And I started thinking back and I'm like, yeah, I don't think Sean would have ever done that for me either. I definitely remember being in situations back when I was breastfeeding my kids where the same thing happened to me and I would have to like squeeze my boob just to release some of the pressure and get some of the milk out. I know this is so gross, but yeah, so that is what she's talking about. They arrive to the place where they're going to play tennis. They meet their instructors. Erin was being very flirty with the one instructor that she thought was hot, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm like, imagine if Abe was on TV flirting with some woman that he was taking lessons from. Can you imagine the wrath that he would face? So I'm finding it interesting that she was being so flirty and suggestive with this guy that was teaching them tennis. Anyway, they all start to play tennis and they all suck. I was actually surprised that none of them were good, considering they were all dressed in these little cute outfits and none of them could hit a ball. Everybody essentially gives up except for Erin and Ubah, and they're sitting down. Brynn feels like Sai is ignoring her. In her talking head, she tells us that her fight or flight is kicking in and she's ready ready to leave. I don't know why she thought Sai was ignoring her. Sai was just sitting on another bench. They did do a flashback where Sai walked in Erin's room and Brynn was standing there, and I guess she didn't talk to her. I don't know. But Brynn tells us in her talking head that there's no remorse there. I'm like, remorse for what? You're the one who went and told Jenna what she said about her. Again, Brynn, the perpetual victim. Brynn is talking to Raquel, and she asks Raquel how to pronounce her last name. Raquel tells her that it's French, and Brynn asks her how she got a French last name, and she said, well, my last name is not actually from my father. I have no relationship with him. When she was little, her mom left her father. From the time she was like 1 to 11, she had nothing to do with him. And then at age 11, she told her mom she wanted to meet him. So her mom tracked down the phone number of her father, and she called him, and he basically hung up on her and said he didn't want anything to do with her and to never call again. Her mom in turn then called his brother, so I guess it would be her uncle, and told him what happened, and the uncle was like, absolutely not, and called his brother, her father, and said, no, you're gonna meet her. So I guess he invited her to Thanksgiving, and she went, and she met her brother and sister. At the end of the night, he gave her a picture of himself and told her it was nice knowing you. And I felt so bad for her when she was telling the story. She was starting to cry. It's obviously still affecting her to this day. And I think in her talking head, she even says, I'm sure it affected me on a level that I'm not even aware of. So I guess she went home and she told her mom that she didn't want anything to do with him and didn't want his last name. So she's like, I want to take your last name. And she's like, oh no, honey, my father was also not a good person. So they went down a list of family names and they found one for her to use. And that's how she got her last name. They finished playing tennis and they go back to Erin's house. Back at Erin's, Brynn is upstairs and she's upset and she tells Erin that she wants to leave and she starts to cry. Erin's like, no, don't go. And in her talking head, Erin tells us, I understand that Sai and Ubah are upset with Brynn, but I know what it's like to have a pile-on. And then we see the clip from last year where Ubah was coming at her when they were in the jacuzzi on their vacation. So she's feeling pretty sympathetic for Brynn. Ubah, Sai, and Jessel all go grocery shopping. Jenna and Rebecca start cooking. Brynn comes down to help Jenna, and Jenna lets her wear all of her diamonds to help Brynn feel better because Brynn was upstairs telling Jenna she felt like she wanted to leave. Ubah, Sai, and Jessel are all at the store. They're talking about how they never go to the grocery store. They're like, when was the last time you were in the grocery store? Which makes me wonder, how do they get their food? Do they have it delivered? Maybe they don't cook? I don't know. How do you not go to the grocery store when you have little kids at home? Kids require lots of snacks and foods and drinks. Maybe the nannies go to the grocery store? I don't know how that works, but you definitely need to have a stocked fridge when you have little kids at home. They decide to play a game called How Much Shit Costs. And they go around the store and they're asking each other how much this item costs. Sai holds up a half a gallon of milk and asks Jessel how much she thinks it is. And I think Jessel thinks it's like $12 or something like that, which would have been insane. But it was $9, which is also insane to me because here in Colorado, I can get a full gallon of organic pasture-raised milk for $8 a gallon. So $9 for a half gallon. I don't know whether it was organic or not, but that was insane to me. Obviously, everything is overpriced because they are in the Hamptons, and I believe Ubah even points that out. Jessel tells them that she's paying over $1,000 a month to store her eggs in Beverly Hills. Sai tells her, you should really put those eggs into a surrogate. And Jessel's like, yeah, I would love to, except for a surrogate costs $250,000. Sai makes a joke, for $250,000, I'll carry 2 of your kids. So I don't exactly know how that works. So say you find a surrogate, do you pay them directly the $250,000? Does the $250,000 include the actual medical procedure where they put her eggs inside of somebody else, or is that strictly for the surrogate? Because actually that's not a bad deal if you make the full $250,000 to carry somebody else's kid. Not saying being a surrogate is for me, because I was not one of those women who relished in being pregnant, but there are tons of women out there that absolutely love being pregnant. So for somebody like that, making $250,000 would be awesome. Sai tells her to just go ahead and do it. And Ubah's like, yeah, get pregnant with me. She tells them, yeah, I don't know. Pavitt is really on the fence. Didn't he tell her that he actually did not want one, that a third kid was off the table? So that's not really being on the fence, right? She tells them that if she gets rid of the embryos, that's it for her because she can't get pregnant naturally. So that essentially closes the door on her ever having another kid. Jessel tells us in her talking head that she thinks if she does not have this third baby, that she'll regret it later on in life. I kind of get where she's going here. My husband and I always talked about having 3 kids, and we had our daughter first and then our son. And after our son, we decided we were not going to have a third because he was quite the handful when he was a little kid. But now that I'm older and he's super mellow, I'm like, I wish we did have that third kid. I'm not saying I regret not having that third kid, but I do think about what it would have been like had we had that third kid. Back at Erin's, everybody is cooking, and I had to laugh because they are all cooking dinner at 6:30 at night, which would explain why they didn't eat dinner until 9. For me, that would have been a little too late. I would have been like Sai. I would have had to have something to eat when she came walking in with her pizza box. So they're all cooking. Jessel clearly never cooks. And Sai does, because you could tell Sai knows her way around a kitchen. She kept having to go and help Jessel. Jessel couldn't figure out the potato peeler. She couldn't hold the pan up to dump her whatever that was into the casserole dish. Sai comes over, she's like, here, give me that. And she does it. So Sai definitely cooks. Raquel was out rocking the grill in her fur coat. That would have been me minus the fur coat. Brynn is upstairs laying down. Erin comes up and she has like this fake cookie with a cockroach attached to it. So they decide to cut the cockroach off of this fake cookie and play a prank on Jenna and put this fake cockroach in her pavlova. Was I the only one who had to go Google what a pavlova was? Because I had never heard of that before. So according to Google, a pavlova is a meringue-based dessert that originated in Australia or New Zealand in the early 20th century. It's named after a Russian ballerina, Anna Pavlova, and is made up of baked meringue, whipped cream, and fruit. Yeah, I had never heard of it. It looks good though. I would probably like it. They all go and get dressed and come back down. Brynn is wearing a green slinky and Jenna's wearing a latex shirt. Jessel asks her if her shirt is made out of a recycled truck. Not sure what part of the truck would be recycled. I'm guessing she thinks the tires. Jenna's like, what? No, it was made by this Japanese designer. They ask Jenna how she got into latex, and she tells them that when she was young, back when she was in her 20s, she was a journalist and she had to write about all the sex clubs in New York. And I guess at that time there was a lot of them. And that one of the ones that she went to was a full-on sex dungeon, and people were doing all kinds of crazy things and having sex, and other people would just stand there and watch. Can't say that would be my thing, but I know there are people out there that are into that. They all sit down for their Shabbat dinner. Erin says a prayer in Hebrew, but forgets some of the lines, so Rebecca gives them to her. Erin tells us that she doesn't understand how Rebecca can be part of 2 different religions that are opposing each other. I wish Erin would have brought this up at the dinner table instead of her talking head, because it would have been a very interesting conversation, and I think it would have made this episode a little bit more interesting. Erin does make a nice toast about all their differences and how they should just embrace each other. I thought that was a really good toast. All the food looks amazing. They sit down and they're eating, and they decide to play a game, Never Have I Ever, which we've seen this played out like a million times, right? We find out that Brynn called Gideon another guy's name right after she had slept with him, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. We also find out that Erin used to flash her boobies to get free taxis. Apparently she had giant D's before her kids, which surprises me because she is teeny tiny, but she says her kids ruined her boobs. Brynn then looks at Jenna and says, Jenna, this question's for you.
Jenna, this one's for you. Never have I ever licked a butthole.
Never.
Oh.
Never. You put a gun on my face and I wouldn't do that. I would maybe lick a woman's asshole, but not a man's.
I mean, if it was bleached and like nice and if she steamed it with her yoni pot first.
Lesbians. 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 Lesbians.
I'm not letting my child watch this.
No.
Listen,
It's not a practice. I'll try anything once.
Why did Brynn specifically ask this question to Jenna? It was pretty rude, and Jenna actually looked kind of uncomfortable and even made a comment like she's never gonna let her kid watch this show. And what was with the chanting lesbians? Brynn acts like a middle schooler when it comes to people's sexualities. She is obsessed. Everything she says has some weird sexual undertone to it, and it is getting old. Does she not have anything else? Erin sneaks off to go get her fake cockroach to put on Jenna's pavlova. We don't see her put it in the actual pavlova, but obviously she does. So Jenna brings it in. It looks really good, and they're all eating it. Jessel ends up with the fake bug. Ubah immediately gets up from the table and starts vomiting, like full-on vomiting. Sai goes and checks on her, and then she starts throwing up because she saw Ubah throwing up. It was like that scene in Stand By Me, a very old movie, where he was telling the story about the pie eating contest, and the one guy threw up, and then in turn he threw up on the guy next to him, who threw up on the guy next to him, and then the audience started throwing up. It's kind of like the same thing. At least Ubah was a good sport about it. She came back in and she was laughing. Throwing up is never fun, so I was actually surprised she wasn't mad about it. Nothing else must go down after this dinner because literally the next scene is the next morning. Now with Old RHONY, yes, I know, let's not compare the two. They are two different shows. But that being said, the Old RHONY, we would have seen home video or phone video of them turning it up. Jessel calls Pavit and he's like, oh, look at you, you're finally awake. And she's like, what's going on with you? And he says, oh, I'm just holding the fort down. And I'm like, Pavit, in Jessel's defense, you travel quite a bit. If you ever watch his Instagram, he's always taking crazy trips abroad to go eat a sandwich or because he's got extra miles or whatever. So for him to be like, oh, I'm holding the fort down because she went away for a weekend, I don't think so, Pavit. Anyway, so she tells him, oh, don't worry, I'm going to give you tomorrow off. And he's like, yeah, right, you're going to end up sleeping all day. And she's like, no, I'm not. And so then he looks at one of the little kids and he's like, who sleeps all the time? And he's like, mommy. And she's like, okay, I'm going to let you go. And then she gets off the phone. She's like, what an asshole. Don't train my kid to say that. So do we think that Pavit is training the kids to say that? Or do we think that maybe Jessel sleeps a lot? Just curious what you guys think. Jessel, Jenna, and Sai are all sitting downstairs at the table. Jessel asks Jenna if she can try on her commitment ring, I think is what she called it, not an engagement ring. And they're like, why do you call it that? She's like, oh, we're just trying to keep a low profile for the kids. And Sai makes a good point. She's like, I'm pretty sure the kids know. And also, aren't the kids older? So what is the big deal? Anyways, this ring is gorgeous. It is humongous. And of course, Jessel puts it on and then she's like, I don't know if I can get it off my finger. The rest of the ladies come down and they're eating their breakfast spread. Erin has definitely stepped up her game because her breakfast spread looks amazing. She actually had a chef come over and make it. While they're sitting there eating and talking, we hear this little side conversation between Rebecca and Brynn. And Brynn is telling Rebecca to give it back to the girls and basically say, like, I have a whole clothing line and you guys have sweatshirts at BravoCon or something along those lines. Rebecca does tell her that's not in my nature to talk like that. And Brynn's like, well, you better start because you won't last long. And I was like, ew, Brynn, can you be any more rehearsed? Jenna doesn't talk like that and she's still on this show. It just goes to show how this cast is so rehearsed. During breakfast, Ubah comes up and she gives Brynn a really big hug. And Ubah tells them that how last night she went to Erin and Brynn's room and they were all laughing. And Erin said to her, see, you guys love each other. And they both looked at each other and they said, we do. Here we are again, you guys. We have another conversation that took place off camera and we didn't get to see it. And now we have to hear about it secondhand the next day. Ubah then continues on after this sweet hug between her and Brynn, and she says that whenever she's out of alignment, it is because of Brynn and that she doesn't like to be interrupted. Why she didn't just leave it at the hug is beyond me, but she decided to go in again.
I don't get mad, I don't scream unless you mean something to me.
Last night, I pulled Ubah into the room and I said, please work it out. You guys love each other.
And then Brynn got up of bed And she came to me and she like touched my face. Like, please, please use your words. Use your words when you're speaking.
I was like, Ubah, I don't want you to come off as angry. That was my priority with Ubah. Not that she's yelling at me.
You know, there were a couple things that I was like, oh, she shouldn't have said that.
I told her, I was like, I want you to marry Oliver. I want Oliver to want to marry you. I don't want you coming off like this as an angry black woman, you know?
And Erin was like, she's not an angry black woman. Don't say that. She goes, shut up, Erin. You don't know. You're not black. Shut up.
I had a feeling that Ubah would think about that and be like, don't tell me how to behave.
Please, just don't tell me how to behave.
I cannot believe Brynn said that to Ubah. Don't come off as an angry black woman. And why did she bring up Oliver? What did Oliver have to do with anything about her being angry? Oliver clearly fell in love with her for who she is. I'm sure he knows exactly how she is. And I'm also guessing that she isn't usually screaming and yelling when she's around him because she doesn't have people like Brynn interfering. So the fact that Brynn brought him up was so odd to me. Maybe this is why Ubah continues to come after Brynn, was because of what she said in this private conversation that we didn't get to see on camera, where she told Ubah not to be an angry black woman. Maybe after that conversation, she went back to her bedroom and then she started thinking about it and started getting worked up again. I don't know. Ubah tells Brynn that English is not her first language and that when someone interrupts her, she gets sidetracked, and this makes her upset. She starts to tear up and she's telling Brynn, you know, you're so beautiful and you're so kind, but you are so condescending to me and to everybody here. Brynn tells her, okay, can I talk now? And Ubah's like, go ahead. And she starts to tell Ubah that she wants them to come from a place of respect and she doesn't want to be talked down to. This sets Ubah off, and Ubah starts telling her that she's only reacting to Brynn being condescending.
Do you want to speak?
No, I'm done. I know exactly what she wants to say.
What?
I know, it doesn't matter, but I know what she wants to say. She wants to say, don't put respect to my name. If you
Don't
call
mock
me
me.
snake. But,
Don't mock me.
but you do that
Don't
all the
mock
time.
me.
You do that all the time.
Don't
with
mock
people.
me.
Just let her express
Let her
herself.
speak.
Express.
Let Brynn speak as well.
No, I don't really care at this point.
I think it's fine. I think it's good.
It's good. I'm good.
Huh. Did you guys hear that? When Ubah was imitating Brynn, Brynn kept saying, don't mock me. Don't mock me. Wouldn't you think that that's a little bit hypocritical, considering we watched Brynn mock Ubah by saying, no, and then seeing her do it again in a clip that's coming up? So how dare she sit there and say, don't mock me, when we've watched her do it to Ubah? Oh, that's right. Brynn is just a victim in all of this. Please. Brynn starts to cry again. And she tells the rest of the group that she's kind of upset with them because they all just sat there. She starts to really freak out and they're trying to console her and she's like, no. And she's freaking out. So Jessel gets her and she's like, let's go for a walk. And she takes her outside. Next week, it looks like Jessel is having a Clueless themed birthday party. I loved that movie. I used to watch it all the time when I was younger. Hopefully it'll be a better episode than this one because like I said earlier, this episode was so boring. All right, guys, that's all I have for the Real Housewives of New York City. I will be back later on this week with my Real Housewives of Salt Lake City recap. So I'll talk to you then. Bye.